About 10 years ago, the UK government funded the creation of the Catapult network. Now, catapults are innovation centres. They take some taxpayer money, they take some relationships with academics, with startups, with industry. They put them all together, and the idea is that sparks innovation. There are 9 catapults in total, each one of them looking at different sectors. One of those is called the Digital Catapult. Now, the Digital Catapult is interested in fostering innovation in terms of the digital infrastructure of the nation. And one of the areas that they have a particular interest in is the creative industries. And that's why today I'm here in what is probably one of the most advanced media production studios, if not in the UK, then perhaps anywhere. And I'm here to meet Digital Catapult CEO Jeremy Silver. He can tell us a bit more about this place, as well as everything it's done over the last 10 years to create creative industry innovation. Jeremy, thanks for joining us. I was going to say thanks for joining us in our studio. It's not our studio. It's kind of yours in a weird way. But before we get into anything, tell us a little bit about the catapults. You've been involved for a number of years now. What are the catapults?
So there are 9 catapults around the UK, and each of them is slightly different from one another. So there are some very, very specialised ones who focus on things like cell and gene therapy or offshore renewable energy, who are very, very focused. The one that I run is called the Digital Catapult, which probably in lots of ways is the most horizontal in scope. And all of us, though, are about really trying to help innovative businesses and innovative ideas coming out of academia get more commercialized more quickly. So helping businesses, early stage companies, startups to engage with new technologies that are just emerging, and helping traditional businesses as well become early adopters. So it's all about early adoption for us.
Yeah, so and it's been about 10 years, a bit more. It's the 10th, you've just celebrated your 10th birthday, I believe, so congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll get into some of the details around some of the things that Digital Catapult's achieved, but just to summarize what I understand it to be, it was a government-sponsored initiative way back in the day, and it's funded through another agency called Innovate UK, I believe, but ultimately it's about joining people together to squirt momentum into R&D in different sectors.
I've never heard it described that
squirting
way.
Yes.
Squirting innovation. But that's maybe we'll consider that for our tagline next year.
That should be at the top of the website, I think. Yeah. But probably the hardest one to understand immediately is digital, because obviously it doesn't matter what industry you're in, digital is relevant one way or another. So would it be true to say that a big part of what Digital Catapult does is look at the digital infrastructure as a whole of the nation, if you like, which might be the pipes and the wires, it might be the skills you need to build those things, it might be, et cetera. Is that one of the areas?
Yeah, I mean, look, the word digital means everything and nothing in some respects. So, yeah. So we've had to frame it, and really, from our point of view, it covers 3 broad buckets of activity, if you like. So, yes, a large part of what we're doing these days is focused on digital infrastructure. So the networks, the kind of studio environments like this one,
we'll talk about
the labs, that you need to build the kind of capabilities that industry needs already and is going to need more in the future. So we're doing a huge amount of work on 5G, for example, and the future of 5G, 6G, Open RAN is a big area of focus, telecoms. Second piece of this, which is, I suppose, really where this studio fits in, is what you might call virtual environments. So one of the things that we're seeing happening more and more is a realization that the more that you digitize not just the network, but actually the product and the service, the more control you can have over it, the more quickly you can prototype things and so on. So thinking about what lives inside a virtual environment and then what the interface is between the virtual environment and the real world is a really a huge area of interest. And then the third one, which kind of links them all together, is thinking about supply chains. So as we've seen recently with trouble in the Red Sea, global supply chains are really vulnerable. And digitizing supply chains is one way of making them more sustainable and more resilient. So we're doing a lot of work in that space as well with lots of companies where this is about working between companies as well as with individual companies.
Yeah, and Digital Catapult and the other catapults, as far as I understand it, a main function is to bring all of those different people together, right? Because once you do that, you've got more people sharing ideas and taking tiny ideas and turning them into really big ones.
Yeah, so we occupy a very privileged place in the landscape, and we have this core funding from Innovate UK, annually renews over 5 years, which means that we can really focus on the work and not have to be so concerned about income, although obviously everyone needs to do that. But we sit in a really, I think, a unique position, but close to government, close to big industry, close to the startup and the investment community, and to academia. And we kind of translate between them.
Mm. So let's talk about this place. I mean, we need to address this. Normally, this is a podcast. Normally, they're quite basic things. They're just a couple of people having a conversation. Maybe there's a camera, maybe there's not. This is an altogether different environment to do this. Now, one of the things I should point out is that one of the folks behind these cameras here gave us some glasses of water, not because they were worried about our comfort, I should point out, but because they wanted everyone to understand who might be watching this, that this is not a green screen. This is something altogether different. Can you tell us, this is probably one of the most advanced studios in the country, I should think, but what can you tell us more about the place that we're actually in right now?
So I suppose if I take a step back and just explain a little bit about where we've come from, it'll start to make some sense. But one of the things we've been observing over the last 6 or 7 years, actually, thinking about it, is the growth of interest in what looked like virtual reality and then became augmented reality. And these days we talk about mixed reality or extended reality. So XR is a thing. And the UK's got real strengths in this area in terms of the storytelling and the content side of the equation. So you think about our history as, our strength in games development, our strength in film, in literature and theatre, in music. All of these things contribute towards something which is an emerging sector.
Yeah.
And it's a sector that is really built around immersive technologies. And one of the things that's happened quite in the last 3 or 4 years is that the games technology that has been created to help make video games easier to make has started to be relevant in other sectors as well, and particularly for film and TV.
Right.
And that's become something called virtual production, which has been around now for actually 4 or 5 years. But it's still an evolving concept, and it's something which is radically changing the way in which production processes go about and occur, and the way in which people can approach filmmaking, TV making, and games production. So this studio encapsulates all of the kind of leading edge technologies that people are experimenting with at the moment. And whilst, the leading edge for quite a while was held by the big players like Industrial Light and Magic, the Disney special effects company, or Netflix, all of those technologies are also available here, with a focus on R&D, on where does it go next.
Yeah.
And we're doing a few extra things here as well in this studio. So this studio, not only is this a virtual production studio, we can see around us, we have motion tracking sensors, for example. In the room next door, we have volumetric capture capability. And that screen behind us there is very, very well, it's big, yes. And it's very high definition LED screen, which allows us to do all kinds of extraordinary and interesting things, which we can get into a bit more about that if you like. But the other thing about this is that it's equipped with a 5G network inside the studio, which is able to start to do really interesting things in terms of automating the movements of cameras, potentially identifying the location of objects on a set, real and physical, and really starting to merge the virtual world and the real world.
Right, so we're in a lab, a creative industries lab more than anything. And now that 5G gives us connectivity as well. This is not the only studio of its type.
Right.
We're connected to something else, apparently,
Correct.
on the other end of the country.
So in addition to having the 5G network within the studio, we've also connected this studio to a twin of this studio, which is in Gateshead.
Right, and for those people who aren't in the UK, in UK terms, there's quite a lot of distance between Gateshead in the northeast of the country
Yes.
and here in London.
Yeah. It's several hundred miles, and a very different kind of environment up there, and a less developed media industry, but nonetheless a really interesting little cluster of animation businesses and games companies. And so we've created the exact replica of this studio in a building in Gateshead in the northeast of England. And these two studios are linked with a 5G network, which is a permanent link. So if we wanted to beam into what's going on in Proto, which is the location of the studio in Gateshead, if we wanted to beam in there right now, we could use that 5G network to do that.
Should have thought about that before we sat down.
We
that
could have
been
done that,
interesting.
but,
Bunch of really surprised Geordies. Hello. Yeah, and we're talking to some of the folks behind the facilities here. This studio's called TechTarget. Sorry, TechTarget. Target 3D. Although TechTarget's quite a good name as well, actually. I might go and register that. Target 3D. Proto up in the northeast. And I think it was just the other day we understood that there was a joint real-time production happening where dancers were being motion captured, I think, in 2 places simultaneously, and the production was happening in real time at both ends of the country.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of thing you can experiment with now, I suppose.
It's the kind of capability that the studio has, and I think what we're starting to see as really the combination of the aftermath of COVID, the impact of kind of economic change and people wanting to try and do things less expensively, people's awareness of the environmental impact of taking camera crews out on location to all kinds of locations and what that involves and the cost of the planet of doing that. And also just the busyness and availability of talent in different places. All of those things together start to combine to make the idea of being able to link remote studio locations and create remote production capability into something really interesting and really valuable to people. And I think it's partly about trying to answer creative demand and different creative challenges of, okay, I want to do something that no one's seen before, and how do we make that happen? At the same time as also thinking about some of those other factors, like trying to bring costs down, trying to reduce carbon emissions.
Yeah, and I think it's probably true to say that the creative industries as a whole is ballooning because we're seeing this, the cutting of the cord, if you like, but everybody's now plugging into various different subscription services, from sports to entertainment. It might be Amazon, it might be Disney, it might be Netflix. There are so many places to go and get your content now that there's such a huge demand for original content. And the only way that you're going to be able to fill the roster, if you like, is by coming up with innovative, lower cost, interesting ways of streamlining your production processes.
I mean, look, the UK is becoming more and more of an attractive destination for production. We've seen an enormous growth, interrupted by COVID, but now picking up again, interrupted by the actors and the writers' strike, now picking up again. But the growth in the studios, the growth in production here in the UK, and the numbers of American productions that are choosing to make things here is just growing and growing and growing, and there's no sign of that changing. And that's for a really interesting combination of reasons. So it's partly to do with the fact that there's a great trained technical workforce here who really know what they're doing, and part of the purpose of a studio like this is to make sure that we stay ahead of the curve on the R&D side of that and upskill people so that they know where this new technology is going. Part of it's to do with the fact that we're less unionized than the US, and so it's easier to do work here in the UK. People can be more flexible, for better or worse, but that's the case. And I think the fact is that the dollar-pound exchange rate helps as well. So when you put all those things together, and the fact that people like coming to the UK to do work because it's a great place to be creative. Yeah,
and there's lots of creative people around to go to the pub with afterwards.
Well, there are pubs to go to afterwards, which you can't do that in LA.
Many.
Can't do that in LA. So there's a lot of reasons why there's increasing focus on the UK. And the purpose of building a studio like this and our counterpart up in the Northeast is to make sure that we stay at the leading edge of this stuff as the technology changes. Because look, there's no substitute for good writing and good acting. But the production, the visual effects, the entire environment also is an enormous factor in all of this. And if we make sure that we're at the leading edge of that as well, then that puts the UK in a really great position around the world.
Right. And it is about the whole of the United Kingdom. And that's because often, especially in this kind of world, we tend to end up focusing on London. We've already talked about how this facility is literally connected via digital umbilical to the northeast. But Digital Catapult has been very busy over the 10 years of its lifetime in all parts of the UK. So can you give us an overview of some of the other things that it's got up to over that time?
Sure. So the organisation is now about 300 strong. We're made up of groups of technical specialists in a whole bunch of different technology areas. So, as I mentioned before, lots of 5G specialists, a group of AI specialists who are quite busy at the moment.
Yeah, I bet.
An IoT, Internet of Things team who are really interested in the use of sensors to capture data in factory environments or production environments. We have an immersive team who've been the ones pioneering this studio and thinking about not just what kinds of content you can make, but what kinds of tools you need to make them and where all this stuff goes in the future. We have teams of people who are focused on distributed ledger technology, blockchain, and where that all plays into the future. And so we've worked with probably 3,000 different companies around the country. We work with about 300 startups a year. Our headquarters is in London, but we have a centre in the northeast, hence our studio up there. We have a growing centre in Belfast, and we can talk a bit more about what's going on there in a minute. And we also have a lot of activity down in the southwest, in Bristol and Bath, and that area where, again, there's real strength in the creative industries. But our work is focused across a whole range of different sectors. So we work very closely with HS2, for example, on trying to make the impact of their program more environmentally friendly and to balance the kind of the disruption that's causing. We're working with some big aerospace companies like BAE Systems, for example, in trying to help them innovate and make it easier for them to work with early stage businesses. And then we work with crazy startups doing, ridiculous, wacky stuff that is mind-blowing, but really fun. Yeah.
Well, it's the crazy, ridiculous, wacky stuff that has to happen for bigger things to come out of them, ultimately. So tell us a bit more about Belfast, obviously. That's the newest, is it?
Well, we've had a presence and we've been building our connections in Belfast since 2017, actually. So we've been there for some time. But in the last couple of years, that's really grown and accelerated. And we have a team of about 20 people in Belfast and across the region. We've built, I think it's our 14th 5G network has just gone live in Belfast or in the northwest of the country there. So it goes from Belfast to Londonderry, I think is the corridor. Right. We're just about to open a major new facility, which is later on this year, which will be a national centre for digital twins.
Interesting. And that in the round, or is that focused in any area in particular?
So digital twins are kind of a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I think it comes out of the world of computer simulation and modeling. And digital twins are really being used by a lot of companies already to do two different kinds of things. One is to do rapid prototyping, so designing something entirely virtually before you ever build it.
Yeah.
So that you can make design changes and see how those are going to work without having to spend the money on a physical build. That's one side of it. And then the other side of it is that once you've created a digitized environment, so a digital twin of an airport, for example, or a digital twin of a factory, you can then use that to actually control what goes on in the factory and to have a view of it all in real time. So what we're seeing around the world is that individual companies are starting to build these things, and some cities are starting to build twins of themselves. The National Digital Twin Centre is going to both make it easier for people to build digital twins, so reduce the cost, make it more accessible to smaller companies, And really crucially, it's going to start to be able to make it possible for digital twins to talk to one another, because a digital twin of a product in one company is powerful. But if you start to connect those together and be able to make them talk to each other, suddenly you're talking about a whole acceleration on a massive scale.
Yeah, you can just imagine what some of the implications there might be. But that one of which presumably being how you start to make supply chains intelligent, the supply chains you were talking about before. If you've got digital twins cooperating across a company's value chain, you can see how all sorts of things can become more efficient.
Well, suddenly you've got better optics on what's going on. You've got real-time data starting to flow through, and so there's enormous potential. So we're starting. We have 3 kind of founder industrial partners. So one of whom is Thales, who's a big defense company.
Yep.
One of whom is Spirit, who make airplanes or parts of planes. And the other is a local business called Artemis, who are making autonomous marine vessels, some of which are going to go and actually provide service and maintenance for offshore turbines, wind turbines.
Oh, great.
Which is a real challenge. So you think about fields full of these massive turbines out in the sea, how you maintain those.
Especially in the North Sea. Yeah.
In really dangerous conditions and really hazardous in ocean environments. Autonomous vessels that can go and do some of that work would be really handy, but actually making those work, navigating those kind of environmental conditions, assessing when it's right to be able to go, giving them the capability of actually doing some maintenance when they get there, that's a hugely complex task, and this company, Artemis, is focused on that.
So Belfast is a hotbed, clearly, which I think speaks to the effectiveness of, I guess, not just Digital Catapult, but all of the catapults in sparking that kind of activity, right? So it's been 10 years. Let's look ahead. What's the next 10 years looking like?
Well, I think it's really interesting, because if you go back 5 years and you think about how the technology landscape felt around that time, you might have felt that we've done a lot. We're just trying to make it all work now.
Can we relax for a second and just take a breath?
That actually, there was a huge amount of innovation that happened in the first wave of the internet, and we then spent 20 years trying to figure out how to actually make all that work. Last year, of course, that all changed again, because suddenly the advent of Gen AI became an absolute global phenomenon, and that is totally setting the agenda now for the next 10 years. So that phenomenon and the coming of quantum technology is the other thing that is going to completely transform things. And for the last 5 years, I think we've probably been a bit uncertain as to how quickly quantum technologies would emerge and become useful. And today, they're still pretty limited in terms of what they can really do, even though the power of them is starting to become more and more understood.
Yeah.
The likelihood of that transforming into reality is becoming much clearer, and it's likely to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So those 2 elements together, AI and quantum, totally mind-blowing, and completely, I think, it's going to be an extraordinary ride. And I know that, there's been a lot of people kind of panicking about quantum disabling all of our security. Yes, we need to fix. We need to fix that. And AI becoming a tool for bad actors around the world and becoming an enormous threat. I mean, all of these things are real, and we can't ignore them. But the positive side and the potential for good that these technologies hold, it's down to us to make sure that outbalances any of the negatives.
Yeah. One of the things that interests me around all of these emerging technologies, really, if you look at quantum, but you look at AI and generative AI, and then maybe the kind of super thing that gets created when you combine those two things, is the legal side of it. I was having an interesting conversation the other day with someone who possibly slightly cynically was saying, look, actually, we're facing the next AI winter here because this is advancing so fast, but the legal stuff really isn't. Where do you stand on that? As in order for this stuff to really become effective and for us to manage the risks as well as reap the benefits, the whole world's kind of got to agree how to govern this stuff.
Yeah, I think we're facing huge challenges in that area, and we inevitably, technology moves so much faster than legislation or regulation can, and I think that's become a reality for us all.
Yeah.
And the real danger, I think, is that we rush to regulation because we panic about the impact, and that we then hamper ourselves. And of course, there is a kind of global competition in all of this, where that balance becomes quite crucial. I don't think there's any doubt. As a country focused on the strengths of its creative industries, the ownership of content and the production of IP is incredibly important to us. And so protecting that and ensuring that we still retain value from it is really important that we do that. And there's no question, I don't think that our current copyright laws protect us against what AI is able to do. And some of that will be resolved commercially by the players engaging well with each other. And I think the companies have learned hugely from the disruption of the internet 20 years ago, and know now that they need to behave differently. And I think we are seeing a different kind of behavior, a quicker, faster embracing of the technologies and of the upside of the technologies. But there's no question that legislative lag is a challenge, as is the total imbalance of technical capability between a very small number of companies and the rest of us.
Everyone else, yeah.
And I think those things, in some respects, go hand in hand. So the need to try and find some ways of putting some constraints on some of those bigger players in a positive way that doesn't disrupt their economic contribution or their technological contribution, but also reduces the danger and the harm. I think is a real priority. And we've got a year of elections globally coming up that everyone's talking about, and we're all terrified about the level of AI-driven disinformation that's going to influence them. That's a real concern. And are we anywhere near grappling with that? Well, we are.
Not really. No.
We're close. We're closer than we were, in as much as at least we're aware of it. But yeah, the challenge is huge.
We will be aware of the tidal wave as it hits us. Might be what this year feels like, but then the challenge will be, okay, look, actually we all need to agree on this. And it is a global effort, I think, as far as I can tell. But that's going to make the next 10 years really interesting for folks working at Digital Catapult.
Well, it's going to be, not just at Digital Catapult, but across the country, it is going to be super exciting. And I think, look, there are a lot of very smart people focused on those big macro problems, and we need those people focused on that. That's not our job at Digital Catapult, actually. We can help and support it, and obviously we want to. But our job is actually to empower business and industry to take advantage of all these technologies and to not be distracted by those big kind of anxieties, if you like, or not held back by them. Understand the risk, but also take the opportunity.
Right. So it's been great to have been here at Target 3D's Central London facility, part of the AMP studios. Come along to node-magazine.com to read a bit more about all this. And in the meantime, very good luck for the next decade.
Thank you very much.